Welcome to the Inquiry. I'm Charmaine Cozier. Each week, one question, four experts, and an answer. December 2019. A man wearing a smart black suit stands on the stage at Oslo City Hall in Norway. He's there to collect his Nobel Peace Prize medal and deliver a lecture.
I also accept this award on behalf of Africa and citizens of the world, for whom the dream of peace has often turned into a nightmare of war.
Fast forward nearly a year later, and that same Peace Prize winner is giving another speech to millions of people in a special morning broadcast on national TV. Abiy Ahmed announces he's ordered a military operation against regional forces in the Tigray region of the same country where he's also the Prime Minister, Ethiopia. Since that early November broadcast, hundreds of people are thought to have been killed in the conflict. So this week we're asking, why is Ethiopia's Nobel Peace Prize winner bombing his own country?
Part 1. Seas of War. Abiy Ahmed is a surprise leader.
Alex Duval is an Ethiopia analyst and executive director of the World Peace Foundation at Tufts University in Boston. He said few would have predicted Ahmed's rise in 2018 when the previous Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn suddenly resigned following years of anti-government protests.
He was a middle-ranking politician, a former army officer who sprang almost from nowhere to become Prime Minister of the country in early 2018.
Abiy Ahmed's early life was spent with his Muslim father and Christian mother in the Oromia region in western Ethiopia. It's home to the country's largest ethnic group. He's the first Prime Minister of Oromo descent to take office.
It was a tremendous symbolic and political act to nominate him as the next candidate Prime Minister.
He spent 17 years in the military, including as a UN peacekeeper in Rwanda, before he switched to politics.
There's no doubt that when he came to power, there was enormous enthusiasm in support of what he was doing. Here was somebody who was dismantling the key restrictions on personal and political freedoms. He released political prisoners. He invited the exiled opposition back home. He lifted the state of emergency, essentially martial law during the protests, and he lifted censorship of media.
Many Ethiopians and several Western leaders praised him as an ambitious and charismatic modernizer.
He's a very talented Pentecostalist preacher, and he's brought his Pentecostalism very explicitly into government. And one of the messages that was most prominent in early months in office was that people just needed to love each other and get along, and problems would thereby be solved.
Half of his cabinet posts were filled with women. He picked up the Nobel Peace Prize partly for resolving a decades-long standoff with neighbouring Eritrea. But his promise of democracy for all didn't last.
The political reforms went in very sharp reverse. There was a political dialogue that was underway with many of the different political groups, and that came to a shuddering halt. In fact, ironically, when he got the Nobel Peace Prize, then, according to many involved in the process, he felt he'd been given a mandate and the blessing of the world to proceed on his own terms, to compromise with others.
Abiy Ahmed's change in approach sparked violent anti-government protests and fears that Ethiopia was heading back towards authoritarian rule.
Some of those who've interacted with him say he has something of a messiah complex, that he has a mandate from God.
Even his own region wasn't exempt from a government clampdown. In July, the popular Oromo musician and political activist Achula Hundessa was shot dead in a car. His killer has never been found. Within hours, thousands of protesters were on the streets across Oromia where he was seen as a hero. The Prime Minister's response was swift. Troops were sent in, and strict measures followed.
He put several of them in jail on terrorism charges, refused to release them when the court said they should be released. He started censoring the media, imprisoning journalists, banning the media. and very widespread arrests of activists across the country. In fact, I'm told that more people are detained now than there were before he came to power. So Ethiopia, even before the war broke out, was headed in a much more authoritarian direction.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister is currently in conflict with another ethnic group, one which has dominated the country's political system for almost 30 years, the TPLF, or Tigray People's Liberation Front.
I think Abiy Ahmed has made a terrible blunder in engaging in this war, reversing all the economic gains, all the gains in food security that have been made over the last 25 years, plunging Ethiopia into a crisis on a scale that we haven't seen for a generation. The tensions were there pretty much from the start of him taking office. He continually blamed them for everything that was wrong in the country. He referred to their period of domination as 27 years of darkness. So his failure to recognize that they really had contributed and they were a necessary part of the political constituency was deeply antagonizing. Part 2, Collision Course.
The Tigray people are one of the historically prominent groups in the country.
Adamabebe is an analyst and advisor with the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, which monitors elections around the world.
The Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, which was at the forefront of the battle against the communist Derg regime, they were central to the armed groups that overthrew the regime in the early 1990s.
Now Abiy Ahmed is battling the TPLF, which has a formidable political legacy.
Because of their dominance then, they essentially shaped the political framework in line with their ideologies, in line with their thinking. They dominated politically for 2.5 decades.
The TPLF was formed by a group of students in 1975 with the aim of destabilizing Ethiopia's brutal dirge regime. In 1991, rebel forces led by the TPLF seized control from the military government to become the dominant group in a four-party ruling coalition. It was called the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, or EPRDF, and kept a tight grip on power.
It was an authoritarian, extremely centralized way of governance.
Critics were jailed, the media was censored, human rights were abused.
They managed essentially to govern a firm authoritarian hand until they were ultimately pushed out of the ruling elite.
Ethnicity runs through the heart of politics in Ethiopia. The country is divided into 10 self-governing regional states, controlled by different ethnic groups. The EPRDF was run by 4 of them.
There's a Tigray party, the TPLF, there's a party from Oromia, there's a party from Amhara, and there's a party from what we call the southern region. They're the 4 biggest regions, if you will, of the country. The TPLF had an equal say as the largest parties in the group.
Last year it was merged into a new group together with 5 more parties to create the Prosperity Party. The TPLF leadership had a choice: be a smaller part of the bigger group and follow its pan-Ethiopian agenda, or leave.
Prosperity Party is based on individual membership, so you cannot claim representation based solely on your ethnicity. And that's why they persistently opposed the transformation. They were concerned that the new power alliance in Addis Ababa could mean that their heydays were over, that political contestation led to the TPLF leaving the party. So what Abiy did was remove TPLF political leaders from the government. They continued to govern their own region. They were removed from key positions in the federal government because now they were not part of the party.
So what do you make of the view that he deliberately went in to dilute the influence of the TPLF?
I think that would be accurate.
Losing its hold on central government power edged it even further along the collision course with Ethiopia's Prime Minister. Adam says Abiy Ahmed tried to reconcile at first, but his language turned aggressive when he realised the TPLF were still not respecting his leadership. The group called him authoritarian. He accused it of human rights violations, corruption, and described leaders as hyenas. He also blamed it for encouraging ethnic groups in parts of Ethiopia to protest his leadership. But Adam says the political reforms Abiy Ahmed made when he came to power also played a part. Has it been Abiy's relaxation of those measures that have led to the current levels of tensions and violence?
Yes, that absolutely contributed. Also, Abiy was, at least in the beginning, more open, and he welcomed even armed ethnic groups back into the country. The state used to have a suffocating presence, and suddenly it was seen as less present, which then gave opportunities for those that wanted to take advantage of ethnicity political goals. But the government thinks that if they subdue the TPLF, if the TPLF is eliminated or controlled, then the inter-ethnic violence will go down as well.
Abiy Ahmed moved this year's general election to next year because of coronavirus concerns. Leaders in Tigray defied his authority and organised their own regional vote last September, which they won. Lawmakers responded by leaving the area out of the federal budget. They also voted to declare the regional government illegal and replace it with a caretaker administration. Then, in November, Abiy Ahmed accused the TPLF of attacking a military base and sent troops to Tigray. His Prosperity Party consists of several groups, so is the ongoing conflict being driven by the Prime Minister or his party?
The Prosperity Party supports the war, and in fact, some of the leadership within the party has come out and said it was Abiy that was slowing this down. Other members of the party, they could have confronted the TPLF much earlier. It's not just Abiy's doing. And it's also very important to know that the TPLF were extremely provocative.
The current leader of the TPLF, Debretsion Gebremichael, a former guerrilla fighter and early member of the group, has said his people are ready to die defending their homeland.
I can say that the relationship, at least between the highest Chileans of TPLF and Abiy Ahmed and his leadership, is broken beyond repair.
Part 3. Home is where the heart is.
My name is Hannah Zaratun. I work for the BBC Horn of Africa, Tigrinya language service.
What does it mean to you personally to be a Tigrayan?
Do you want me to speak my heart?
Yes, your heart.
I feel proud to be Tigrayan, and I grew up learning sympathy for others and the essence of equality and justice, Truthfulness is something I value in my life. I copied it from the social structure of the people of Tigray. Let's say, for example, if I say I love you, I meant it. If I say I hate you, I meant it.
Ethiopia is the second most populous country in Africa, with a population of 110 million people. 7 million live in Tigray. Hannah is from its regional capital, Mekelle.
The people is a peace-loving people. Unfortunately, if they know there is something that's against their existence, they will fight back.
Our previous expert, Adam Abebe, described how the TPLF refused to endorse the new Prosperity Party, which wasn't organised along ethnic lines. Hannah says there's a determination to safeguard cultural bonds, as past struggles have shown.
Tigrans were oppressed over the dark region period. They were oppressed against their language, against their ethnicity, because they fought for their existence. Their ethnic background is valued in front of other ethnic groups.
She says many Tigrayans supported Abiy Ahmed.
Towards the TPLF, to be honest, the youth is totally against that party, because they believe it becomes a party that cannot transform. Rather, a party lives in the past history. there was no hope of change and democracy with the rule of TPLF in Tigray. So when Abiy came to power, the expectation was high.
Hannah now lives and works as a journalist for the BBC in Kenya, but her family is still in Tigray. When did you first hear that the conflict had started fighting had begun?
It was early morning. It was a friend's text that woke me up from my sleep. He said, "Have you heard about Ethiopia?" And I said, "What? What's new in Ethiopia?" He said, "Abiy Ahmed ordered the military to attack TPLF," he said. And I was shocked because I have seen the fear we had realized.
The ongoing block on communications in and out of the region means she hasn't been able to reach friends or family there since the fighting started.
Now I am not able either to call, even to see my family, because I cannot travel. There is no any means of transportation to Tigray, and now it's a war zone. I have no idea how the situation is affecting their lives. They live in the area, which would be part of the targets of the attack. And I always pray and hope that TPLF leaders, I imagine they will fight to finish in this fight.
Hannah is especially worried about her 11-year-old brother. He has epilepsy and cerebral palsy.
He's a child who really needs treatment, and everything is dependent on us because he is a kind of child who cannot speak, who cannot walk. I don't have words to explain my fears. Every day is a nightmare for me.
So why is the Prime Minister fighting his own people?
Abiy is fighting for his power, and the TPLFs are fighting for their power.
Part 4. Domino Effect. You have two extremely battle-hardened and well-equipped forces fighting each other in very rugged, mountainous terrain.
Ahmed Solomon is a research fellow with the Africa program at Chatham House. He says the battle in Tigray is devastating the region. The United Nations says the situation is developing into a full-scale humanitarian crisis.
The TPLF has a military history, an organizational sophistication, a firepower that rivals the federal forces, if not surpasses it. So you have that alongside armed farmers and militias, anywhere up from 200 to 250,000 armed fighters. And that's a pretty terrifying prospect of what might be to come in terms of a lengthy conflict in the region.
In a recent tweet, Abiy Ahmed said, "Concerns that Ethiopia will descend into chaos are unfounded and a result of not understanding our context deeply. But the fighting in Tigray hasn't ended as swiftly as he hoped it would, and there are fears it could foment instability in other ethnic regions."
So there is the potential for this conflict to evolve and to spread to different parts of the country. And that, I think, is when you could be thinking about calling it a civil war. We have the involvement, for example, of Amhara and militia and special forces in the fighting in Tigray alongside the federal army. This is something that could become a case of different sides dividing to support one or the other. And a case of my enemy's enemy is my friend, for example, where despite there being historical differences between groups or animosity in the past, you might see short-term tactical alliances prevailing.
Ahmed is also monitoring how the conflict might destabilize other nations.
Ethiopia is an extremely important country in the Horn of Africa, and East Africa is one of the largest contributors of peacekeeping troops to UN missions, with thousands of troops largely based across the Horn of Africa, including in Somalia. So there are reports that Ethiopia has already begun removing some of its forces from those missions, so that could have an impact on peace and security, on stability elsewhere.
If Ethiopian troops are redeployed from Somalia to Tigray, it creates an opportunity for militant groups like Al-Shabaab. Back in Tigray, Ahmed says parts of the region were running out of food before federal troops arrived. Crops have been destroyed by one of the worst locust plagues for years, and harvest stores from last year were low. Roads are blocked and the airport is closed so fresh supplies can't get through. There have been power cuts and water shortages. Humanitarian workers have left the area on safety grounds.
The intensified fighting will have left many people, civilians as well as armed forces, caught up with injuries and casualties. There is some information coming out with civilians that are crossing into Sudan, and of course, I think the majority are talking about their personal desperation and having lost their homes, having lost their livelihoods, and really not being certain of when conflict might end and when they might be able to go back home. The situation across the border in Sudan is one where there is an increasing number of refugees on a daily basis. 5,000 refugees seem to be crossing over from Tigray region into Sudan, and this is projected to increase potentially up to 100,000 refugees.
Sudan is host to over 1 million refugees from other African countries. International aid workers there report treating wounded fighters and civilians from Ethiopia, and they're expecting thousands more in the weeks to come.
Calls for an immediate truce, a ceasefire, and an end to the conflict and coming to the negotiation table really haven't borne fruit at this time. But there is a potential, if this military operation that is supposed to be short and incisive looks as if it's going to evolve and become much more protracted and lead to heavier civilian loss, then there could be an opportunity for mediation to play a part.
So why is Ethiopia's Nobel Peace Prize winner bombing his own country? Abiy Ahmed has a vision for national unity, which is incompatible with the TPLF's ethnic-based politics. The TPLF's time at the centre of federal government may be over, but long-standing deep divisions remain. The public trading of insults has descended into war. Both sides feel they have been provoked. In a rare statement, the committee which awarded Abiy Ahmed his Nobel Peace Prize has called on all parties to end the escalating violence. As our final expert Ahmed Solomon says, it's difficult to see a military solution.
History has shown that Ethiopia's problems aren't going to be resolved through fighting and through bloodshed.